Welcome back to TechNet Radio. In today's episode, John Baker interviews John Clark, a senior consultant with the IT operational consulting team at Microsoft. Listen in as they dispel some of the myths and misconceptions floating around cloud computing and it being a replacement for IT service management. John, the mic is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is John Baker. I'm here today in cloudy, looking out the window here, cloudy Bellevue, downtown Bellevue, Washington. So today we're talking to John Clark, and he's a senior consultant with the Microsoft U.S. National Consulting for Operations team. So John, welcome to the TechNet Radio. And tell me, what is it that Microsoft Consulting for Operations does? And more specifically, what do you do in the area of cloud and IT service management?
Well, thanks, John, and good morning, good evening as well to you. OPSCON, which is what we're known by, actually a professional we've created a number of professional services offerings around IT service management, as well as guidance and improvement on traditional on-premise technologies of Microsoft's, and have recently started to develop IP and services in the cloud space. From an ITSM perspective, we're very technology agnostic, and as we'll talk about later, it doesn't really matter if it's on-premise or off. Service management's still the same. And a lot of these services range from assessments, strategy planning, design, as well as implementation and transition of both cloud and on-premise solutions around, especially from a service management perspective. Most of the team is fundamentally versed, if not expert, in the service management area.
How many are in your team? Do you cover the whole U.S.?
Well, there's OPSCONs in each country. The national U.S. team, there's, I believe, count 33. We're having our offsite here in Phoenix, and I think at the current moment there's 33 of us.
Okay. Well, I've heard that some in the industry have said that with the cloud, that eliminates the need for IT service management. Have you heard that? And if you have, can you elaborate on what they're talking about there?
Yeah, I've heard this a number of times. I've read it in particular in January. There was a CIO magazine blog called ITIL versus the Cloud. Pick one. And it basically was, the premise was the cloud is fundamentally incompatible with ITIL. ITIL being the widely accepted framework for professional IT management. And Microsoft also has our complementary MA framework. Right, but I think the author of the blog may not have understood or thought ITIL or service management is just about managing infrastructure and applications. Yeah. And I don't know about thorough understanding of what cloud offers and what it doesn't. I believe that what service management's about is provisioning and managing the delivery of value and IT services to customer, whether that's on-premise, off-premise, whether that's people. It's not about cloud or non-cloud. So, IT service management, which is the execution of delivering service from an IT organization, it doesn't prescribe cloud versus in-house, and fully assumes that in many cases supporting services may come from an external provider, such as a cloud provider, such as Microsoft.
So tell me then, with cloud computing, what is it, and why is it important for not only for us and our customers and our colleagues? What's important about the cloud?
Well, I would argue cloud computing is actually IT service management realized. If you listen to Mr. Ballmer and others in our industry, we're making this transition from being a technology product company to a service company. And it's very different from making software to actually providing a service. Delivering infrastructure, delivering software, there's a lot of number of players. It's getting a lot of press and a lot of notoriety, both in the enterprise as well as consumer space. There's really 5 key characteristics of cloud computing that makes it very, very different. And it's really on how it's used, how it's acquired. It could be it's typically on-demand, utility-based. You or I could go get a full Exchange SharePoint live meeting account this afternoon and be up and running fairly quickly. Could do that for a good-sized company. When you get into larger companies, it may take a day or so, but it's very, very quick, much quicker than your traditional implementation. Ubiquitous network access, the ability to access it from anywhere. Not having to build all the network infrastructure. Metered use, or what I call utility usage. Pricing is based on consumption. There's a variable cost versus having all that fixed cost in infrastructure. Right. And then elasticity, where its usage is consumable in any quantity. As I said, you or I could go get an individual account, or you and I as a IT manager or director could go to Microsoft and get 300, 3,000, 30,000, 300,000 accounts very, very quickly. And then resource pooling, shared as well as dedicated models for the delivery of that service. There's also a number of different deployment models depending what you're doing. I've mentioned a lot of more of a software as a service, Exchange, live meeting, and so on. But there's also things such as platform where there's more of that programmability. Microsoft's offering in this area is, of course, called Azure. And it still separates the users really working from a platform perspective, not really down to the OS. But then there's other offerings such as IaaS, or there's really not, PaaS and SaaS are two words made out of acronyms. But infrastructure as a service, where the customer has full administrative control of the operating system, basically as if they own the hardware. And then there's 4 delivery models: private, community, public, and hybrid. Private cloud being essentially taking internal systems and presenting them as a cloud service to internal customers. You don't get the benefit because you're still, some of the benefits of public cloud computing, because you still have the investment, the cost, the administration, but you're now presenting infrastructure as a service as opposed to just a capability. Community, public cloud, which is probably the most common that you hear about, offerings like Microsoft Office 365, formerly known as BPOS, which is more of a public cloud out in the environment.
I hear this term, or these terms, multi and single tenancy. What is meant by that terminology?
Well, very much like multi-tenant, single-tenant homes. Customers, and this applies to all of the infrastructure platform as well as software as a service. You can either share resources with other customers or have very dedicated. In multi-tenancy, customers aren't aware of the fact that they're sharing infrastructure bandwidth and storage and whatnot with other customers, where normally in a single-tenant environment, there's the one tenant. It may still be a virtualized environment, but their VM, their storage, address space, database are all single. It's very boxed off and closed to one customer. A great example of this, again, is Microsoft Office 365, and there's actually multiple models of single and dedicated variants of Office 365, and it obviously comes down to a pricing model, and it comes down to what the customer needs, and decide whether they need a multi-tenant or a single-tenant version of that platform.
Okay, it's interesting. So can you elaborate on IT service management and why cloud and ITSM are not the same thing? And is cloud computing, is that a form of outsourcing? Because it sounds like, it gets outsourced to some external partner or some external company rather than you managing it internally.
Well, and when asked this question by people in the industry, I say it's like comparing apples and car batteries. Leveraging the cloud doesn't and shouldn't change the focus of IT service management, as I described it before. With public cloud, essentially what's going to happen is, instead of managing, and again, service management provides guidance, the frameworks, MOF, ITIL, they provide processes and guidance on managing infrastructure. Doesn't mean you have to. You can work with cloud providers such as Microsoft and relegate a lot of that change management, configuration management to them. All right. And so instead of OLAs to an internal infrastructure provider, internal group within the organization, you just have under what's called underpinning contracts with Microsoft or with a Microsoft partner that happens to be hosting or representing the cloud service. Any organizations leveraging private cloud are going to have to provision for capacity and availability based on the services that consume private cloud resources. So if we're talking private cloud, there's still that separation between a customer who consumes it, how much they consume, and what's the expected service delivery around it. But the service delivery to the customer doesn't change. And in essence, what we'd like to do and get to is really the capability where a customer's in customer. So, for example, an enterprise that has 10,000 email mailboxes, and they move to Office 365 because some of the benefits around availability, around cost, are compelling to them. The users really shouldn't notice the difference. It should look like Microsoft Exchange 2010, whether they get it from the cloud or they get it from from on-premise. But some of the advantages that cloud can offer to an IT service management organization is it increases the agility of the organization around support, operations, and backup. They can move quickly. Talking about utility consumption or metered consumption, you can move very, very quickly. It helps to decrease or minimally identify cost. For example, the go-in price right now for Office 365 is around $10 a user per month. Okay, so if you've got 20 users, your cost is $200 a month. Pretty easy, and that includes Exchange, SharePoint, Link 2010, and Live Meeting, which has now been modified into Link 2010. That combination of software, when you think about the infrastructure and everything that's required to deliver that, is very, very hard to beat internally. And I use this with some of my customers to just ask them, can you even quantify what your cost would be to deliver these services internally? Because this could, if nothing else, be a great comparison point from what they're delivering now with on-premise capability, as well as, and compare that to what they can get through the cloud.
So what opportunities does the cloud offer to help IT organizations with their IT service management?
Well, I would argue the biggest thing is it allows them to move in what I call higher into the stack, and that's higher into the service management process stack, but probably more importantly, higher into the business value stack. I talked about focusing on customer value, business agility, and enablement of something I call synchronization, establishing business IT alignment, but moving beyond that to almost a intertwinement or synchronization. Because IT is now not spending time, investment, money in things like infrastructure, which isn't necessarily going to give them a competitive advantage in the marketplace, they can now focus on those IT innovation, those things that they can leverage information technology to make them competitive against their other market competitors. Cloud, I really think is the realization of a book by a gentleman by the name of Nicholas Carr. The book was called IT Doesn't Matter. It was written about 9 years ago. Raised a lot of, obviously a lot of argument because everyone was saying, yeah, IT does matter. But his point was this, is that IT innovation at first does matter for competitive advantage. But once you get out over time and I deliver Exchange, just like, say, you're a competitor of mine, you deliver Exchange, that's not giving us competitive advantage. So it's best that if I can do it cheaper than you, that's obviously more money that can go into IT innovation, it can go into the business, and start addressing, in other words, reducing a lot of what I call run the business expenditure and allowing IT to contribute to and focus on more business growth and business transformation.
So tell me, John, what are some of the challenges and concerns and security myths that are around cloud computing? Because you hear a lot about that out in the industry.
Well, some of the challenges and concerns, I think, stem from news. You hear outages when a cloud service provider has a failure. Recently in the news, if you've been watching, a certain mail provider, I won't mention names, but that starts with G and rhymes with Google, dropped 40,000 email accounts. You could have that same incident take place in an enterprise, and it does, but you don't hear about it. It doesn't make the news. And I liken it to airline travel versus traveling in an automobile. It's obviously safer. It's been proven statistically it's safer to fly versus drive. Last year, in 2010, there was actually no fatalities in commercial air flight. And I think the number was 9,000, or excuse me, 24,000 in 2009 alone died in car accidents. So it's this news, it's this exposure that a lot of myths and realities are kind of not correct. So you mentioned security. Probably the biggest myth around security, and again, going back to the news issue, if there was a security breach in cloud, the cloud industry would probably not be growing at the pace it is. It's been addressed, and security isn't just a compliance regulation because of federal mandate, because of industry mandate, but it's from a marketing perspective. If I'm offering a cloud service that's not secure, people aren't going to go to it, and they'll probably run away from it very, very quickly. And so you have certifications such as SAS 70, ISO 27000 that cloud vendors have to go through, and they have to invest the money, they have to invest in the audits, because they can't afford those hiccups. Another federal security guideline is called FISMA. It's the Federal Information Security Management Act. That's another one of these levels that says to do business with us, our data must be secure. It must be located in the geographic United States, and other countries have those same requirements. Performance is also talking about the multi-tenancy, single tenancy. That cloud computing performance can vary because of shared resources. And in fact, this is true, but it doesn't have to be. And it comes down to what level of service do you want to buy from your provider. You can save a lot of money in one of these shared environments or multi-tenant environments where your data is still very secure and very separated, but you're sharing resources, which brings the price point way, way down. If you absolutely need a certain level of service because you have downstream service level agreements with your customers, then obviously you'd want to pay more to say, I need this guaranteed level of availability, resilience, so on and so forth. Availability, as I said, is also one of those myths. It's, what's our availability? And obviously, if you're coming in over the internet, internet could be an issue. I don't remember the last time the internet was down. I'm sure it's still a possibility. But if you look at some of the facilities that cloud providers have built for their cloud services, very, very redundant, usually metropolitan, national, or international in scope. So, if there's a geographic outage due to natural disaster, war, any of these things, a good chance that you won't even detect or see that switch over or that movement. And then around data ownership, as I mentioned before, some of the recent contracts with the federal government have required that, well, data could exist in the cloud, but it has to exist in the cloud within the boundaries of the United States. And once again, there are guarantees. It's part of the contract that says, I don't want my data leaving a certain geographic region or a certain level of security, so on and so forth. And for these types of things, you can move to what I talked about earlier was a hybrid cloud, which is a mix of both public and private, where if it's an actual mandate that data must be housed within physical on-premise, that can be accomplished as well.
So, in conclusion, then, what would you like our listeners to take away today as an action item? What do they need to look at? What do they need to do?
Well, first, I'd say consider your current pain points, and given from what I know about our industry, cost is probably one of the biggest drivers. People are looking to the cloud. They're learning to let go of that urge to own and control everything. I think it's kind of like the airline automobile fallacy, where I feel safer because I'm driving from Ohio to California versus flying, when that's a very incorrect assumption. It's probably much, much safer by incremental levels to fly that distance than to drive. The other thing is pilot and test out cloud computing. Right now, it's new. I mean, it's beyond new, but it's still fresh. And cloud vendors such as Microsoft are giving it away for 30 days. So sign up, try it out. There's only your investment in time, and again, it's because it's so quick to get enabled. It's something that is a low investment to say, is this going to work for me? Does it address our policies around data ownership and data integrity? And then, as mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, our national delivery team has defined a number of quick services, some remote, some on site, but they're as short as a week or two. Or we can talk about service improvement programs, as is to be around the Office 365 platform. A thing we do called service mapping that we do for traditional on-premise customers, we now do with the Office 365, where we're mapping the service that they're going to ultimately deliver that includes the Office 365 components delivered by Microsoft. And then an operations strategic review that's going to give a high-level roadmap to move towards a cloud environment and provide customers with a strategy. As we continue, as this industry grows, we'll be offering more. And there will be an email address that you can send an inquiry to if you want to find out more about these offerings. And then I would also suggest go out and look at Microsoft Online Services. You should be able to Bing Office 365 or BPOS and be able to, it will take you right to a sign up today and try it out.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time, John. I think there's been some great information for our listeners here. And enjoy the rest of your week in Phoenix. It's got to be warmer than here in Seattle. So take care. And again, thanks for your time.